also want to note that it's the 10th leading cause of death in the U.S., but it's the only cause of death in the top 10 that is continuing to rise, not decline. An American dies every 12.9 minutes by suicide, and that's 115 people per day. Okay, we got it. Suicide's a problem. There's a lot of stigma surrounding mental health issues and suicide, as well as misunderstanding. That's why we're here today, and so what can we do about it? We can start by paying attention. When we hear a young person talking about suicide or wanting to take their life or being a burden or just indicating in any way that they're thinking about suicide, we need to take it seriously every single time. We're now going to watch a clip of AFSP's Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Christine Moutier, who will talk about the risk factors that contribute to suicide.
Life is worth living. Suicide is a health issue, and it's largely preventable. Suicide happens when multiple factors come together, so it's not related to just one cause. You can think of the underlying risk factors for suicide in 3 different buckets: biological, psychological, and past history. Biological risk factors for suicide include things like mental health problems, like depression, anxiety, or substance abuse. Those are all risk factors for suicide that underlie and may not have even been recognized at the time the person dies by suicide. Psychological traits that present a risk for suicide are the tendency to interpret life's events in black and white or catastrophic ways, to be impulsive, aggressive, or extremely perfectionistic, and those don't allow us to be as flexible and to cope quite as well with life stressors. Past history can really put somebody at risk for suicide in a way that becomes an invisible layer because it might have happened many years ago. Things like a past history of childhood abuse, or a past history of severe brain injury, past history of personal suicide attempt, certainly, or a family history of a suicide. Those are all historical events that place a person at higher risk for suicide. On top of all of those underlying risk factors that can be quite invisible to people around that person, of course there are life events going on for all of us, stressful things that we're dealing with. And so for individuals who have some of those underlying risk factors, those stressors that they're facing in their current day life can absolutely precipitate a crisis. One of the biggest risk factors when it comes to suicide are mental health problems. What research shows is that 9 out of 10 people who have died by suicide did have a diagnosable mental health problem at the time of their death. It may or may not have been recognized or been treated. And so that means we really need to look out for one another. We need to learn the warning signs for suicide risk and know what to do when we see that, just like we do for CPR or first aid. We can recognize when somebody is suffering from a heart attack or another physical illness in a crisis. So some of the warning signs for suicide are changes in behavior. The people around you that you've gotten to know well, in your family or in your friend group, they have patterns of behavior. And when those patterns change significantly, take note of that. Speak to them if you're concerned. Some of those symptoms look like changes like this: withdrawing socially, isolating from you or from their normal life's activities, becoming agitated or easily angered, which we don't often associate with depression or suicide risk, but agitation absolutely is a very common experience when it comes to people who are feeling suicidal. Increase in anxiety, changes in sleep patterns or appetite, those are all warning signs that the person's mental health is deteriorating. Certainly if they begin expressing any thoughts about life being not worth living, or thoughts of ending their life, or even if they're not saying it, but they're doing things that seem odd, like giving their belongings away, those should all be taken very seriously. And if you notice things like that, certainly speak to the person in a caring way and you can also lead them to help. Unfortunately, there's a lot of stigma attached to these kinds of experiences that relate to mental health. So many of us actually hide or cloak the distress that we're in. We keep our experiences very internal rather than reaching out and connecting with support. We need to do everything we can as the role that you have in your family and in society to shatter the stigma, to talk about mental health as any aspect of health like any other, and to approach people that you're concerned about and be open with what's going on in your own life as well. Having the risk factors that I just went over does not mean that a person will die by suicide, but it does mean that we need to do a better job of looking out for one another. There are also protective factors that come into play and that we can think about shoring up for ourselves and helping our loved ones to improve upon as well. Those protective factors against suicide risk include things like feeling connected to your family, to friends, and to your community. Having a regular source of health care, including mental health care, and feeling supported in that. Learning good coping strategies in life is very important, and we can start teaching our kids that at a pretty early age. The last protective factor is knowing the signs that you are needing to seek help. It's the smart and courageous thing to do. It's not a sign of weakness to reach out and get help when you need it.
So it can be easy to mistake mental health symptoms with just normal teenage behavior, the moodiness, the laziness, the immaturity, just poor attitude overall. However, it never hurts to just have a conversation. I know it's very uncomfortable, and we all want to believe that this isn't going to affect our child or that it's not going to happen in our family, whether it's your child or any other child or a friend, a parent. If you see these signs, just open the conversation. Let them know that you're a safe person that they can talk to. So most parents believe that Most parents believe the myth that if they discuss suicide or say the word suicide, that they're going to be putting that thought in the kid's head, and that's just not the case. It's been proven that talking about it is basically the best thing that you can do. It's not going to lead someone down that road. It's not going to make them want to do it. It actually makes them 3 times more likely to actually seek treatment if somebody talks to them about it. So especially if they approach you, just be open and courageous enough to have that conversation with them. These are some of the most, these are the 7 most common mental health conditions that are linked to suicide, but focusing just on mental health conditions solely doesn't give us a full picture of suicide risk. There's really no single one cause for suicide, as she was saying. It's just something that happens when our stress basically exceeds our coping abilities at the time. And that's most often with somebody who is suffering from a mental health condition.
If you want to go back, there we go. I just kind of wanted to stress on this. We just heard Team Recovery talk about the coping that they, that I think Matt, I remember his name, right? Matt, right? That he found addiction to opiates through coping. You know, that's how he found to be able to cope with that. One thing I do want to talk, and that was kind of social acceptance and stuff. One thing I do want to touch on is bullying. There's a lot of issues and discussion around bullying in our communities now. One thing I do want to clarify is that bullying is does not directly result in suicide. Bullying has an indirect relationship with suicide in that when a child is bullied, they might develop one of these mental health conditions associated with, or putting them at an increased risk for suicide. Now, think about a little girl, the women in the room, we all been there. You're in junior high, you're in high school, you know, some stupid boy says that you're fat, and you are going to put a stop to that, right? So, excuse me. So then you develop an eating disorder because you don't want to be fat anymore. You don't want to be bullied because you have a couple extra pounds or just the kid is being rude. So I just wanted to touch base on that and make sure that we clarify the differences or the connection between bullying and suicide, since that's a hot topic. Next slide, please. So one program that AFSP has developed, it is a More Than Sad program. More Than Sad is a program that has 3 separate parts. The first part is associated with indicated for teenagers. So unfortunately, we have not had the success that Team Recovery has had of getting into schools and providing this information to schools. All of it is free of charge. We're willing and ready to provide the information to them. But then there is also a segment of that program that's geared towards teachers and our school administrators. And then there's also a portion, which you're seeing a very abbreviated version of tonight, associated with parents. So helping parents understand teenage depression and suicide risk and stuff so they can identify that in their students. One thing I will note is that the program itself is kind of the gold standard of, if everything ran perfectly, that's what you'd be looking at in this film. So there is a film associated with it that if we went into the whole program, we'd go ahead and watch that. It's designed and developed to be given as part of health class in high schools and junior highs. Next slide, please. Driving home the key points of More Than Sad is that, of course, depression is a common problem that causes significant distress and disruption in teens' lives. That it is an illness. I think in a slide, next slide, we're going to see an actual physical representation of what that illness can look like in a human brain. And that depression can occur, of course, after issued some kind of external stimuli as a coping mechanism.
So I just want to touch on one more myth around mental health. Mental health, again, is sometimes looked at like it's not a real thing, that people are just seeking attention, especially kids, I think. I know that with my own personal experience with my family, that's how I was treated. And that people want to say, oh, just think positive, or just snap out of it, pull up your bootstraps and just work through it. But the thing is you wouldn't tell a diabetic to just think positive and their sugar level will normalize. You wouldn't tell someone with cancer to just toughen up and that the cancer will go away. As you can see from this brain scan, depression is a real thing. You can physically see it. It's not made up. And the affected person is not going to get better unless they get treated. And whatever that means, whether it's taking some kind of medication that's going to help them, whether it's going and talking to somebody, it's not the same for everyone. The same thing doesn't work every time. But it's important to, if you identify these behaviors in your own child, to help them get to a mental health professional, find somebody that they are comfortable with. If that means you have to switch 2 or 3 times, just find something that works for them. And if they're prescribed a medication, pay close attention, make sure you're seeing their behaviors, if anything's changing. Sometimes it takes a while for it to get better. Just, stay on top of it, talk to their mental health professional, make sure that they understand the behaviors you're seeing, and that they are reported for any unusual thoughts that they're having. If they open up to you about having suicidal thoughts, make sure that you close that link and that you're talking to their therapist as well. So we're going to watch one more clip from Dr. Loutier, and she's going to talk about how you can specifically reach out.
If you're concerned about someone who may be struggling in your life, the right thing to do is to open up a caring conversation and ask them how they're doing. Ask them directly about whether they're having suicidal thoughts. That will not plant the idea or make somebody at increased risk for suicide. Once you hear what's going on with them, and if you remain concerned, then the next thing to do that's very important is to talk to them about seeking help and to reaching out beyond just help from friends. If the person expresses any thoughts about ending their life, people being better off without them, or extreme desperation or hopelessness, the right thing to actually do is to reach out for urgent help. And you can do that by calling 911, taking them to a local emergency department, or calling the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK. If you are worried that your own health is deteriorating, or you're not sure what's going on but you just don't feel yourself, the right thing to do is to talk to somebody you trust. That could also include your primary care physician, where you might think about getting a referral to a mental health professional.
So again, it's scary, it's uncomfortable, but just remember the rule of thumb. If you're wondering if somebody is depressed or anxious, that's a sure sign that you should just reach out to them and talk to them. Don't wait for them to reach out to you. Trust your gut and assume that you're the only one that's going to reach out to them. So for more information, you can visit our website, afsp.org. There's tons of information and resources out there. If you have any questions, you can ask Rachel and I at the end. We can create a culture that's smart about mental health and suicide prevention, and together we can save lives. Again, thank you guys for listening, for coming tonight. I also grew up in a very good family. I was well loved, I still am. I, of course, would never have thought something like this could happen in my life. We all want to live under that belief, but the fact is I've been affected 7 times. That's a hard thing to say, and I know a lot of people have been affected as well. You know, my daughter's been affected, and just thinking about that, for not only for her, but her friends who love her, family members who love her, you know, that she needs to be talked to about it. And I know a lot of people are scared of the subject and they want to think it's not going to happen to them. And the only way to prevent that is to communicate. Just please communicate with your kids. You know, that's again the one place my parents went wrong, is they just didn't talk to me about this stuff. You know, had I known I could reach out and ask for help, I would have done that in a heartbeat. Luckily, someone pushed me and I was able to get help, but that's not always the case. If kids don't feel like you're safe and that you're gonna not get mad at them, or you know, you say things like suicide is selfish, or you know that people just want attention, all the things that you hear people say. Please try not to say those things, because what you're saying to the people around you is that you're not a safe person to talk to. And I don't think any of us in this room want to be that person, because we wouldn't be here if we were. So just, we have a lot of information back there on what to say and what not to say and where to take them. And again, you don't have to be a mental health professional to talk to somebody about this. If you're worried about them, talk to them and then point them in the direction of where they can get the help. And just let them know you care. Thank you. If there's any questions, we can answer those.
To encourage questions, I have gifts. Really? You're going to make me go home with these things? Anything? Well,
I'll ask a question.
yay, thank you!
Can you give us some examples of what we could say to someone that might be struggling with that? Because you said what not to say, but what? Or how to open that conversation, like?
Well, first of all, if you're going to have that conversation with somebody, chances are you know that person well. And it's just a natural, it could just be a natural conversation between you and your loved one. A conversation about how they're feeling. Like, what are they thinking? Do they have thoughts of harming themselves? Do they have thoughts of, or do they have a plan in mind? You know, what are they thinking about their future? Start probing into questions that's going to get them to start thinking farther out than just right now. one of the programs that we support is gatekeeper training. Sorry, completely blanked. And gatekeeper training teaches you those skills. Again, program that we can bring to our community and give out free of charge. It teaches you how to talk to people and maybe get them to like stop for that one extra second, become that speed bump that's going to get them to pause long enough that they regain the control over their impulse center, because that's where that's what research has told us, that's where that originates, the idea to take your own life. So it just gets them to pause and think for one extra second. So just engaging them in any conversation, you can use the word suicide with them. And as we heard Dr. Christina Mathieu say, that it's not going to plant the seed, it's not going to give them the idea. So, did that help?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
First step to recovery is admitting you have a problem. What happens when they don't admit they have a problem and they blame everybody else?
Right. Fortunately, in my life, I have not had to necessarily deal with that. I had a sister who was really close to that, though. It's a lot of, I think, what Jen had expressed, making sure that they know that you're a safe person to talk to. Continuing the conversation, keep talking about it. Even if they don't want to talk about it today, maybe they'll talk about it tomorrow or next week or the week after. So don't use their stubbornness or their inability to see what's in front of them as a roadblock or to stop the conversation. Did that help?
Be persistent.
Yes.
As a teacher, we screen kids from 3rd grade all the way up with their, all this. We screen for all this stuff, do all this data, have all this all the way up, and pass this along and then give the information to the parents. What happens when the parents don't do anything from that point? I mean, we track these kids from 3rd grade all the way up, and boom, in 4th grade, you have at-risk kids. And you have all this information, and you talk to the doctor, and you do all this, but that parent doesn't take, what's your idea about that? Your hands are tied.
Right. I think in the teacher presentation, part of More Than Sad, the teachers and school administrators, it goes into that a little bit more. Again, your hands are tied, you're right. But part of it is the education piece. Why AFSP is so big on developing programs to educate our communities and make everyone aware of the reality of what's happening. And through that, hoping that we can make sure that conversation happens. I'm not a teacher. Unfortunately, I don't have kids, so I don't really know what that conversation would look like. But I think it's just sticking with it, making sure that you constantly, or not constantly because your hands are tied, but pointing out specific things. One reason why AFSP has attacked or made a very high priority to get to students, to get to teenagers, is that not only the death rate in ages 10 to 14 or 24, but because also that's where suicide prevention is going to start. It's going to start with education. And so the more we educate, the more examples that we use, the more that we make sure that the conversation is open. Now, are the students coming and talking to you about things?
We have to screen them on the school sense where we have all this information. Do they do this, do this, this? You're spending like 3 minutes on each kid, 25 kids, and you have all this data, and it goes every year, every quarter we do it. So I'm looking at, and then once we turn that in our guidance counselor, we have a guidance counselor that's taking care of roughly, if you have 300 kids, she's looking at one person is trying to take care of 150 to 200 kids. When your kids are going to a counselor, think of how much time they're getting. So you can recommend them going to get extra help from an outside source, but the parents don't carry through with that. So you have all this information, you can give it to them, and the parents don't follow through, and then I just struggle with that,
Right. Unfortunately,
Yeah, I don't think there's an answer.
Sorry.
I wish there
I
was.
think there was a question back here first, and I'll get to you.
I noticed you didn't mention anything about cutting. We have youth in our ministry that are cutting even visibly, that we can see this. Is that generally something that leads into, obviously they're depressed, but into suicide? Can you explain a little bit more about the cutting?
So cutting is it's a very complex. So what we know about cutting is that that is the coping mechanism that individual has chosen or that student has chosen. And that coping mechanism may or may not eventually lead to the relief that they're seeking. I believe that is, you just had a conversation with Lisa about this, but I believe, that is something that it can be an outward appearance or outward sign of something much, much, much deeper. Clearly there are some demons in that closet that they're trying to keep at bay. So it's probably a more physical manifestation of the deeper problem, which could be a mental health issue. Yes?
As a teacher, I find that a lot of parents will say, we don't have the funds to get our child that counseling. So what do you have free places that people can go to get that counseling for their child? Because that is a drawback for a lot of people. They're like, we just don't have the finances to send them to a counselor. And the school counselor can't do it all.
Right.
You know?
Right. So AFSP is not a direct service organization. Every year at our Out of the Darkness walk, it happens the first Saturday in October, we have a bunch of mental health organizations out there. You can reach out to, I believe NAMI provides at least guidance on situations like that, but that's not something that, since we're not a direct service provider, that's not something that we're directly involved with. Grace is creeping, so I think we're done.